Okay, so if that fun voice did not remind y'all, again, there's only a few of us here today, but we do record these so that they can live on YouTube after the fact. So we certainly hope that this will be helpful for other folks in the future. But just for anybody that just didn't see that, again, this month is Comprehensive Sexual Health Education, and we've got some guests here today that are really put most of this content together for us. That will sort of give us some guidance and context as we move through the work. So to start, if folks feel comfortable, please just share your name and information and pronouns in the chat. My name is Stephen. I'm Director of Community Engagement for Planned Parenthood of the North Country here. I'm based out of Watertown. And Nicole's here as well. I use he, him pronouns, and my favorite thing about warm weather, probably the mental health factor that comes with it. That is really great. I'm shining over here. Oh, something in the chat. I'm sorry. Sorry, y'all. It's like my computer's super far away from me, so I apologize. I'm struggling to see y'all. Oh, there's my chat. All right, Cassidy, pleasure to have you. Thank you for being here today. She, her pronouns, and kayaking. Yeah, I would have to agree. That's high on my list as well. Okay, I will try and keep the chat open too, so I can actually see it. Thank you for sharing. Hello. Let me get out of the way so you can say hello. Whoever would like to tell us next, go right ahead.
All right, hello. If you can hear me, I'm trying to speak loud. My name is Morgan Greenwood. My pronouns are she and her. I am the community engagement coordinator here in Watertown. My favorite thing about the warm weather is tanning, to be honest. I just like soaking up the sun. I do use sunscreen though. That makes it better.
My name is Skylar, and my pronouns are she, her, and I like going to the beach. That's my favorite part about warm weather.
You're gonna take mine. My name's Cheyenne. I go by she and her, and my favorite thing about the warm weather is probably I like going to the beach and tanning. I like laying in the sun. But
I can't see you, Nicole, so you guys.
There's my favorite. There's a lot to fit on one screen there. We're doing our best. I'm Nicole. I am the CAP educator, so community or comprehensive adolescent pregnancy prevention. Sorry, I just walked in the room. But my favorite thing about the good weather is just the same thing. Soaking up the sun, just having that vitamin D soaking in your skin is the best. So yeah.
Okay, so we're going to dive in again, just to reiterate, today's content is being recorded. If you have any questions, again, I do have the chat open. I will jump up and answer questions as we're getting them. We can see it if something pops up, but just I'll have to move to see that, and we'll try and stay up to this way today as we're discussing. All right.
All right, so for learning objectives, what we're trying to accomplish today is learn what comprehensive sex ed is and the benefits from it, understand the current state of sexual health education in each state across the United States, and identify key differences between current and proposed sex ed curricula. We'll learn throughout these slides that every state is different and they do have a lot of power to go about sex education in different ways. And then, so these are our normal community norms. Just to pull out a few for today's topic. Nobody knows everything, together we know a lot. So based here for the community engagement team, we do know a lot about this topic, but there's something you might know that we don't, so bring it up if you want. That's what we mean by nobody knows everything, but with the help of each other, we'll gain some new knowledge through this. Also, number 4, ask for clarity and or literacy. There may be terms that some of us don't know, so if you don't, just speak up. We'll try to clarify and clear up those misunderstandings or dive into more specific details about them.
There will also be at the very end a resource page. So if folks want more information to do more homework on their own time, there will be some different folks and websites folks can access to take a look at more of this information as well. So in terms of doing your own homework and really getting literate around sex ed, that will be an option as well.
You want to do the next? You want to do the next one? Oh, it's already up.
Yeah.
Okay, great, awesome. Okay. So talking and kind of giving an overview of what comprehensive sex education is, because it can look really different. And before we actually dive into what it looks like in different states and what it looks like in the particular curriculum that we're looking at today, I just wanted to cover what it could be. So it could be a lot of different things. Basically, comprehensive sex education covers topics related to sexuality and sex that are medically accurate. So they're based in science. They're also evidence-based, so a lot of times they have testing that can be done to prove that students are actually learning something. Age appropriate, so as you're going to see in our slides, the way that we made our slides or the way they've put the slides together, age appropriate is basically as you grow up, and that's kind of what the word comprehensive is about. As you grow up, there's certain topics related to sex and sexuality that you need to learn about. And that doesn't mean that we're necessarily teaching topics to kindergartners that we're teaching to our 9th and 10th and 11th graders. Those topics are slightly different, and you're going to be able to see that a lot more clearly when we go through it. And culturally sensitive, so depending on where you are in the world, you know, the audience that you have, always being culturally sensitive is important for the program you're using. Sorry, a little out of breath because I'm trying to project my voice and be under a mask. So. Okay, so a lot of these programs also, the goal is to explore your values and beliefs because we're all different people. We all have different beliefs and values. And we want to give those students those skills that are needed to navigate relationships and just learning about your own sexual health. I'm out of breath. So these are just some of the topics that are covered in K through 12 programs. Again, like I said, we'll go in more depth here, but these are some of the topics that could be brought up in some different programs. Not every program has all of this. And honestly, I'm not going to read through everything because every program is a little bit different. So we're going to take a closer look at what this means. And so schools actually have the choice to pull out some of these if they want to or put certain things in. So just be mindful of that. I think that's it for this slide. Unless there's anything that anybody wants to discuss about the particular topics, but yeah, I know it can be, there's a lot there.
I think, if I'm remembering right, the next slide will talk a little bit about some of these pieces that states have or have not applied. Actually, I think I'm getting ahead of myself. No, yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself. Sorry, go ahead.
So, well, what this is really showing you is that all those topics that we just showed you that kind of constitute what comprehensive sex education is put together by a team of professionals, a very large team spanning across many different organizations. And all together, they've created this framework in order to give these programs that, you know, medically accurate, that age appropriate, all of those pieces to make it work. So what we're following in a lot of those programs is called the Professional Learning Standards for Sex Education. Anybody can look those up. I'm sure it's probably on our resources. So yeah, there's lots there that you could pull out of, but that's how most programs are kind of made. And ideally should include. So as it says there, ideally should include. So we'll get into that a little bit. And then sex education, by the way, takes place in schools, in community settings. A lot of it's been online this year. But just to really reiterate, families and parents play a central and critical role in providing sex education. This is just what students are getting in school and from people like us who are coming into the classroom. So the next bullet point, Planned Parenthood. We are the largest nation, or the nation's largest provider of sex education. So reaching 1.2 million people a year. So people like us are going into schools and having these conversations about sex education.
I think it's an interesting reminder too, because as we're talking about with states, I mean, obviously, again, Planned Parenthood nationally is tailoring that education state by state as well, depending on what the different landscape looks like. So, yeah. So even though we have ideas of what sex ed could or should look like, excuse me, it's going to be a little bit different from how it is in New York, for example, next to Arkansas. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And these are just some of the benefits, obviously. So this is something that we're showing also the principals or the administrators that may be wondering, well, why should I be doing comprehensive sex education? You know, like we're mentioning here, different states have different choices, different schools have different choices. So why comprehensive sex education? Why should you learn about it from K through 12? Well, this is why. The research, part of that evidence-based, this is what's come out of some of that, is students or young people especially, obviously we're generally talking to young people about this topic, but of course there's other age groups that are hearing this, but generally speaking, it's delaying the initiation of sexual intercourse for young people. They learn to have fewer sexual partners throughout their lifetimes and why that could keep them safer. Having fewer experiences with unprotected sex. So you learn about the many different uses of protection. So increasing adolescent use of protection, specifically condoms, because they have the information, they know what to do. And then altogether, because they're staying in school longer and because they know what to do to protect themselves, their performance in school actually goes up when they have this information. So this is the facts, and that's what has come out of comprehensive sex education, you know, evidence-based, all the facts coming from those programs.
As these become more common too, it'll be interesting to see how you see more of these shifts occurring as well. So
Absolutely.
I'm excited.
Yeah. Now I think we'll talk about our states.
Yes, I knew it was coming up. Okay, so I know this graphic might be a little bit confusing, but I'm trying to make heads or tails of it. So really what you're seeing is all 50 states. I know it might be itty bitty from Alabama, I think Wyoming should be here at the end, but they must have dropped Wyoming. That's okay. So 49 states, but again, you're seeing all the different sort of criteria that might have been applied from one state to the next and where those things have occurred. Like we said a few minutes ago, and I've said, we'll probably say a few more times, even though there are federal standards that are out there, because states are self-governing, states have a lot of just autonomy or freedom to decide for themselves what and how sex ed looks like in their different states. And these are just some of the additional measures that different states have put into place. Obviously, there's other stuff to pluck out of here, but these are just some of the ones that we pulled out that were easily enough to discern in quick glance, but also kind of important, at least in our opinion. So you see anything here in the green, these 13 states that are remarked require sex ed to be medically accurate. So aside from like the sort of initial thought of like, wow, that means that 37 states have autonomy to decide, well, this doesn't need to be medically accurate, whatever. The important piece here for both states that are, again, here represented in green and the other 37 that are not, they still get to decide what medically accurate means. So there's not even like an agreed upon definition as to what medically accurate really looks like. So, states, again, unfortunately, or depending on how you look at it, fortunately, have a lot of decision making to do around just that. 25, so half of our states, again, in this blue, this third one here from the bottom, require sex ed to stress abstinence. So not only that they talk about it as an option, like a preventive method or a choice around sexuality, but that's the goal or the gold standard that they're trying to drive home during their sexual health education. And we know that abstinence only education, again, data tells us that abstinence only sex education does not prevent STDs, STIs, pregnancy, teen risk factors. Again, so I'm not saying that abstinence shouldn't be part of the equation, but recognizing that half of our states are pushing that narrative, it is a reality. Only 9 states currently, again, in this sort of like purple bar here from the bottom, one up from the bottom, require that sex ed be, require sex ed be inclusive of sexual orientation. So compared to 5 that explicitly require that sex ed portray sexual orientation in a negative light. So as an example, Arizona that you see right here, Arizona requires, when you talk about HIV/AIDS, to tether that to homosexuality and basically say, well, HIV is high risk, so homosexuality is basically high risk. It's not saying, oh, well, it's HIV, being gay is negative. It's just sort of tethering, unfortunately, based on stigma and kind of misproves the disproportionate impact of HIV/AIDS on like LGBTQ folks. and again, not even a full 1 in 5. Again, not even 20% of our states are requiring that sex ed be inclusive of sexual orientation. We, as educators, do incorporate that language, that inclusive language, and those inclusive pieces into our sexual health education. And we still get feedback from students that says, I really wish you would talk more about what, how LGBTQ people have sex and protect themselves, because it is still not the norm. It is still overwhelmingly grounded in, anatomy, physiology, and how you make a baby and how you don't make a baby, how you prevent making a baby. So again, often carves out LGBTQ identifying students and does not really make a place for them or their realities around sexual health. You'll see, or you might have noticed too, a few of these, like Pennsylvania, New York right here, are blank. It's not that New York does not have a standard, it's that New York has not added in these extra sort of layers to their standard or their law or how sex ed looks in New York State. So we really kind of function under that national standard that Nicole was talking about a few minutes ago, which is for the most part represented by middle school sexual health education that kind of talks about puberty and how your body works and reproduction to some degree. And then again, basically the same lesson in high school for, with a little bit more about STIs maybe. And overwhelming, like in a big HIV/AIDS piece, that is sort of one of the remaining factors that is just present in all of these programs nationally. And again, an outdated reality for most states. Any questions about this?
Yeah, and New York too has that. They have an HIV and AIDS requirement. So the reason why we use some of the programs that we do is because we're fulfilling that requirement, and then some, kind of what you're speaking about. We're able to talk about some other things as well, which is so it can be confusing, but definitely it looks different everywhere.
Yeah. Basically, yeah, we are doing the bare minimum, but we're lucky again, for example, where we are, that we get to do more. Okay, let me give this to you all. I'm going to get out of the way and I'm going to watch the chat.
All right, so we started off, we did it by grade level. So the first grade we're going to be talking about is kindergarten. There are more objectives in each of the grades. We were just using the most ones that we felt were most important throughout the grades. So the first one is going to be understanding your bodies. Just being able to correctly identify all of the body parts and understand why it's important to know the actual names of the genitals of male and female. And then my space, your space, which is knowing your boundaries, basically being able to name 2 ways of being touched that you're okay with and also not okay with, and being able to explain why you don't want to be touched in that way and how to effectively speak out about it. And then in first grade, knowing gender roles, 2 ways that children of all genders are supposed to behave, and 2 ways that they're supposed to behave differently based on their gender. And then the circle of life, which is basically reproduction, being able to define it and differentiate between things that can and cannot reproduce.
Okay, so second grade, they should be able to understand their bodies by correctly identifying 4 body parts for the female and male genitals, and also knowing to seek help if they're being touched in a way that is forceful or, a way that they don't want to be touched, and how they should be able to tell trusted adults that they're uncomfortable about being touched in a way that they might not have wanted to be touched. And then defining what a boundary is, they should know the SAFE model, which is stop, get away, to find an adult and explain to that adult that they were touched in a certain way that they did not want to be touched. So to go to an adult to tell them if they were touched and that they were feeling in a way that made them feel uncomfortable.
And I apologize, I'm over here. Nicole and Morgan, I'm sure, I know we'll jump in a few times with sort of some of our own perspectives, to have a little bit of context. We can't help ourselves, or at least I cannot. Really the first thing I wanted to point out about this is, by second grade, young people should be able to at least identify several of their body parts and the body parts of other people. that is something that as of right now, we're really not getting into until like 6th or 7th grade. So, and part of it is exactly what this is reflecting, that, you know, if someone touches a person inappropriately, acts in an inappropriate way with a child or young person, they're going to be able to describe what exactly was inappropriate about that interaction and why. They're also going to understand the, you know, the boundaries in the space of other people and why it's inappropriate to touch other people, with the other people your age, your classmates, and why, again, you know, there are you know, different forms of appropriate and inappropriate touching, you know, things like that. And unfortunately, these are just not things that are all that. Oh, I'm sorry, Kathy. I was just saying that had trouble hearing me. That it's just really important. Or I think that one of the things that's really remarkable about this model at quick glance, just by having only gone up to 3rd grade now, is that you know, young people now are really only learning this information about 12 years old or so. Really, at puberty seems to be the age most of these conversations are happening. But again, you know, obviously young people's bodies are developing. You know, they're having conversations about personal space and boundaries. You know, there are appropriate and inappropriate conversations and things like that between young people and with sometimes with adults or whatnot. So this is just sort of laying the groundwork so that young people understand what is, you know, inappropriate and not or appropriate. You know, and who it is that you know, or how to, again, go about reporting or indicating to somebody when something's been inappropriate. Part of the reason I'm just saying this too, if you think about it, it's really laying the groundwork for, you know, sexual violence prevention later in life. That's really sort of kind of the piece here that I'm trying to get home. Thank you for letting me know. I apologize. Our setup here is a little funky. So certainly let us know if you're having any trouble hearing us again.
Oh, this was one of the activities.
Yeah.
So basically, you think about a perspective from a 3rd grader who would be about 8 years old, to share some thoughts or words you might use to define or describe a boundary. The boundary is obviously a lot different for somebody who is 8 rather than if they were a lot older.
Do you have any thoughts or things? Again, we would have done this as a larger group, but just any quick, if you want to share in the chat or right ahead, just trying to think of, you know, I'm at a third, somebody that age, you know, what words or language might you use to define boundaries? I think about maybe my backyard, and maybe if I had a fence or like, oh, they're only allowed to stay in the yard, you know, so I could see a child being like, oh, you don't get to leave the fence or you don't get to leave the grass line. So, like, you know, recognizing what your physical boundaries are as you're maturing.
I think we were talking about one in class, and it's like for somebody who's 8, like their boundary might be like, oh, I don't want you to like hold my hand or like put your arm around me or something. So that might be their definition of a boundary for them.
Yeah, we learn about your bubble at that age, definitely. I was gonna say, like you're usually told, like, if you don't want to get a hug or a kiss by, you know, a certain family member, that you have the right to say no to that. That's a boundary. That's something you can choose to do as you grow up, and that's, I think, probably around this age, maybe even a little younger, but yeah.
I think that's an important note too, like the idea, like, oh, I don't like when grandpa gives me kisses, it's uncomfortable or whatever. Teaching people at this age that it's okay to have autonomy, and, you know, and you control your body and you control how other people interact with it. I think those are all important pieces of life.
Okay, so on to 4th grade, you start talking about puberty, describing at least 3 changes that take place during puberty and the physical, social, and emotional changes. One thing you can do to manage all of those changes and being able to identify one reliable and accurate source of information about puberty. And then knowing your body and your rights, being able to define the terms of sexual abuse and sexual harassment, and list at least 3 accurate facts about sexual abuse among young people around the age of 4th graders, and being able to know and identify a trusted adult that you can talk to if somebody is sexually harassing you or abusing you. And then on to 5th grade, being able to identify 2 parts of the biological male and female reproductive systems and their functions, and again, identifying one reliable and as well as accurate source of information.
describe how puberty prepares the human male and female body for potential to reproduce and the process of reproduction and identifying the correct order of steps involved in conception. And then you start to learn about HIV. So you should be able to define HIV as a virus and that is transmitted through bodily fluids and identify at least 2 ways HIV can be transmitted and also not transmitted, and 1 way to prevent and treat HIV.
One of the big things that's coming out of this curriculum so far, though, that I've seen is that students will have to learn both biological parts, male and female reproductive systems. This is a big thing right now. I know personally when I was going through sexual health in high school and middle school, you learned, it was more focused for females to learn the female body parts and then not to really learn about the male body parts. So at least here they're getting to know both functions, which is great in the long run.
I think it's pretty learning for both genders. What both genders are going through. We did it 8th grade, and we still now occasionally will get requests where they're like, "Oh, we really just put up the boys, quote unquote, and the girls, quote unquote." And I'm like, well, are they going to be split up forever? Because they're going to have to share some space and some reality at some point. The other thing I think is really remarkable about this, would you not? I just wanted to. So back on 4th grade, really quickly. And this is stuff that's typically happening, 6th, 7th grade, and maybe even 8th grade, depending on the school or school district. The thing that I plucked out when we were first going through this curriculum as a group is how, between folks that are biologically female or folks that are male or identify as male, it's more common again for folks with female reproductive systems to hit puberty earlier. Whereas it seems like the way we were addressing puberty education was like, okay, you all should have been there by now. You're already in this uncomfortable stage where you might not be sure what's been happening to you for a couple of years now. Let's talk about it. As opposed to, hey, this is going to start happening in a couple of years. Let's preempt you about it so you know what you're expecting.
It can absolutely be a traumatizing time. So I think this is a great model to start to,
Yeah, it's like, before most people, have their first period. You're not going to be shocked or you're going to know what to expect. I also, when we were going through this as a group last week, and I will say again to the folks here today, I know adults who don't understand sexual abuse and sexual harassment, or sexual, any of those things. So the idea that, we were talking a few minutes ago about, boundaries and space. Again, by 4th grade, you're recognizing what is inappropriate touch. And unfortunately, child sex abuse is not uncommon. So this to me is just one more part of, it's not just about teaching comprehensive sex ed, equitable sex ed. It's also about preventing sex abuse, and it's about preventing sex abuse and sexual violence later in life. It's a lot of different pieces that are more than just sexual violence. Go ahead. One more.
We did mostly 5th grade now, yeah.
Alrighty, so in 6th grade, change is good. They should be able to name at least a physical, social, cognitive, and emotional change they go through during adolescence, and 2 websites that contain additional medically accurate information about puberty for young people in their age category. And then understanding boundaries again by 6th grade, knowing the boundary for their age, demonstrating how to be clear about one's own and show respect for their boundaries, and understanding that you shouldn't violate somebody's boundaries or like go up in their space or do something that they don't want you to do, being too close. And a resource that they can go to report sexual assault or rape.
Also something I think that a lot of teens and adults would not know
Well, and I think the reason for that too is the way that this is made is because we're learning at a young age what it is, and then again redefining, and then we're also defining what our bodies are going through. I think we're getting a lot better complete understanding, whereas if we just got all of this at one time at 6th grade, like you said, when it's happening or even after it's happening, it's not really doing as much good as before it happens or building up that knowledge to get to this point.
Alrighty, so then also 6th grade, communicating about a sensitive topic. So the 3 different types of communication, passive, assertive, or aggressive. So with assertive communication, they should be able to tell somebody if they don't want to do anything sexual with them, or whether they do or don't, but 6th grade. Understanding how to communicate assertively about one's decisions, to sharing with any sexual behaviors or if they've been through. And then understanding romantic relationships, 2 characteristics between a friendship relationship or a romantic relationship, and then the similarities between friendship and romantic relationships.
Again, I feel like that's building that knowledge along the way. You wouldn't be able to define those things without further having that knowledge ahead of time and what that is.
Well, I will say here again, we get a lot of requests to do like healthy relationships or conversations around relationships. But it's important to recognize that most no sexual health education standards now require that piece. So we're talking about biology more often, reproduction. Two bodies that somehow have to come together and either make a baby, not make a baby. Protect themselves, not protect themselves. But there's never really like a context for saying, how did they get there? They have a relationship. Like it's always just male body, female body, baby, or no baby, and it adds context. It's really critical, especially around 6th graders. I mean, when we're asked to do this now, it's like, hey, could you do puberty, sexual health, and healthy relationships? And this is the first time I'm having all these conversations. It's you're hearing words and language you might have never used before, but you're also trying to navigate your interpersonal relationships with your peers on top of this awkward conversation about language you've never had to talk about. If it's part of your ongoing curriculum, we've been having this conversation for 10 years already, or better part of 10 years, this isn't going to be new and it's not going to be really awkward or uncomfortable.
Alrighty, so on to 7th grade, just realizing that everybody has body parts. You should be able to name at least 2 parts of the male and female internal and external sexual and reproductive system. You should be able to describe the function of at least 2 of the parts and demonstrate a basic understanding of the menstrual cycle and of where sperm is made, and as well as how it leaves the body. And understanding the reproduction basics. You should be able to describe the process of human reproduction and identifying the correct order of the steps involved with it. And you should also be able to define sexual intercourse as well. And then continuing on with 7th grade, understanding and preventing STDs. Again, define STDs and HIV, name at least 3 common STDs and how they are transmitted, and compare sexual behaviors that put people at high, low, or no risk for STDs. And then being smart and staying safe online. So you should be able to describe the positive aspects of online talking and messaging, identify examples of flirting and chatting that can be inappropriate or risky, and demonstrating an understanding of how to deal with an uncomfortable situation while communicating online.
I know, I was going to make a thing.
I didn't know.
The one thing I will say too about this is, this is really the first instance in the entirety of the curriculum so far, where we're actually talking to people about sexual health with one, between some kind of sexual. So there's this sort of myth out there, this idea that comprehensive sex ed is having this conversation with best friends and kindergartners. That's really not the case. We spent 6 or 7 years laying it groundwork so they understand when they get to this content what they're already talking about. It's not the work. Okay, we have to do all of 6 years worth of education and then get into STDs, SDR, prevention, virus. What we're seeing is it helps to have a little bit of groundwork laid in advance, or it would be helpful.
Yeah, because not we don't always have the option to use such a comprehensive curriculum, because as you can imagine, this takes a lot of time out of classrooms. And some schools say, we don't have that time. All we need is this. And we're trying to show you that there's a lot of great reasons why going through these other activities can help, give those students and those adolescents the information they need, not only just to navigate their sexual health, but like navigating online and navigating all kinds of other things in their life. So,
Whoa. Okay, so 8th grade, healthy or unhealthy relationships. So characterize at least one relationship trait that's either healthy or unhealthy, and then 2 types of power differential in relationships, as well as their implication for the relationship. And then describing at least 2 ways in which an unhealthy relationship can become a healthy one, or vice versa, and apply your understanding of healthy relationships to a couple represented in the media. And then understanding sexual abuse and assault, so naming at least 2 different ways of sexual assault, and name at least 1 example of each of the following. So aggression, threats, unfair manipulation, or mutual consent. And then describing at least 2 possible impacts of a sexual assault or abusive relationship on the person who may have been assaulted, and demonstrating an understanding of how to report sexual assault or abusive relationship. And then also 8th grade, birth control basics. So describing the impact of the correct birth control method and how effective it is to prevent the pregnancy. And then correctly recall that there's generally a gap between when a person may start to have vaginal sex and when they may wish to get pregnant, and then which birth controls they can use if they don't plan to get pregnant. So the 7 methods that we just wrote down, there's obviously more, but abstinence, external or internal condoms, pills, patch, or ring, the IUD, shot, or implant, withdrawal, emergency contraception, or dual use.
And 9th grade, it wasn't my fault. Basically, it's just being able to describe the impacts of rape and sexual assault and with somebody who has been assaulted, explain why a person who may be in the situation, how it's never their fault and they're never the one to blame for the actions that went on, and being able to name at least 2 online resources a rape or sexual abuse survivor can access for more information and support. Understanding gender, explain what gender and gender identity are and how they're different from biological sex. Define a gender script while providing several examples and identifying at least 3 sources of gender scripts and messages they've received growing up. Sexual decision-making, identify various reasons why teens choose to engage or not engage in sexual behaviors. At least 3 questions whose answers can help determine if they're ready to engage in a sexual behavior with a partner, and an articulate a message about sexual boundaries with a partner during a role play activity. And then again with the STDs, avoiding or managing, name the only 100% effective way of avoiding an STD. Explain why having oral, anal, or vaginal sex with an infected partner puts a person or a couple at risk for STDs. And name at least 1 health clinic or center in the area that provides STD testing and treatment for teens.
This wasn't the one we were just on, is it? Okay. So now on 10th grade, knowing your options. So that, to list at least 3 methods of effective birth control for teens. At least 3 factors that have an impact on a teen's ability to successfully use birth control. And recall at least 2 reasons why a teen might want to use birth control that are independent from preventing pregnancy. Jeez. And let me tell you. Explaining the impacts of having a communication style that is similar to or different from a partner on the ability to communicate about important topics. Communicating with a partner about STD risks and protecting their own or their partner's sexual health. And demonstrating an understanding of where and how to be tested for STDs, both in person or in So 11th grade again, boundaries, because the boundaries here are a lot different than, was it third grade? Third grade. Explaining at least 2 examples and types of boundaries for this age category. Clarify that their own boundaries are in relation to physical touch and demonstrate an understanding for the need to communicate about boundaries in a romantic or sexual relationship. And abusive relationships. So describing at least 2 characteristics of 5 different types of relationship abuse. And in your own opinion, does and does not constitute relationship abuse. And then one online and one hotline resource that teens could go to if they're known to being in an abusive relationship or someone they know.
I know the activities you guys. Okay. Just really quickly, because again, I just sort of wanted to building on, how boundaries shift over time, especially in tracking along with this sort of content or just learning. Just sort of thinking, any ideas what boundaries you would all identify? Again, feel free to share in the chat if you have any ideas. I came up with it is like, in the 3rd grader, might want to be like, oh, sleep with the door open, it's scary or something. Or it's like, a lot of grader might be like, don't go in the room ever without my permission.
Yeah.
So that kind of like personal space boundaries. Other thoughts or inputs?
I think at this age too, you know more about who you are, what you like, what you're okay with. Like, you know more about your values a little bit at this age than you maybe did in 3rd grade. Like, you have an idea, but you're more confident in yourself, maybe, so to speak, and say, I'm okay with this, or, you might call out other behaviors and say, that's not okay with me. That's kind of a boundary for me. So if you're, in an instance where there's people, like friends, making fun of somebody, like, that's a boundary for me. I don't want to take part in that kind of behavior. That's not part of my values. So boundaries can go with values. It can go with, your personal space as well. So yeah, I think that's just one other example. But yes, personal space too. I mean, that can also go with this as well, as they might be getting into more romantic relationships at this point and learning how to actually stick up for themselves. So that goes with it too, being able to say, I'm okay with this, I'm not okay with this when it comes to having sex and being in a romantic relationship too. So I think kind of both of those.
I definitely think those types of boundaries definitely come from a curriculum like this, though,
Mhm.
that they've already had all this geared up for them, so they have that confidence in themselves.
Right.
Say if a person didn't go through all of this education throughout these years, and then they just got what we give, which is great. We try to pack everything in 4 to 5 days, but they're still not confident in themselves to be able to set those boundaries. That's where the difference lies.
Right. Well, and if they're being
Yeah.
told by an adult later in life, you are doing the right thing, this is okay for you to stand up and say that you're not okay with this, or you want this to happen. Like, you're getting that confidence from other people who are telling you in your life that this is okay. So.
All right, and the last grade is 12th grade. So My Life, My Decision. Name at least 3 messages they receive about sexuality from different people in their lives. Describe the extent to which these people have an impact on students' decision-making, and identify at least 2 other factors that have an impact on sexual decision-making. And then getting savvy about STD testing. List at least 2 reasons why a person might choose to get tested for STDs and why they might not choose to. Identify at least 2 resources for STD testing in their own community, and describe the rights of young people have regarding STD testing, including confidential and the quality of care they should receive from the provider. And that is it for the grades.
But is it for the curriculum? The folks that maybe in the chat they wanted to know more about, or anything that they were surprised about, or anything, or any takeaways that are really impactful, feel free to share. Again, I just wanted to kind of use this opportunity to just give us a couple of minutes to share anything, particularly 2 of you again. For those we haven't said this yet, but Taylor and Shannon are actually finishing up high school in a couple weeks. Congratulations! They actually had this education recently than any of the Nicole Morgan. So, anything that you wanted to share, or anything anybody that they want to share that they feel is especially applicable that we haven't already talked about.
I just think it's crazy how this is all the information that you're supposed to learn, and having to try to push that all within like a week seems kind of impossible for like students to actually take it in and understand it and be able to recall it later in the future.
Yeah.
I just want I kind of the way you're thinking, it seems really impossible, and I kind of like glanced at Nicole and Morgan because I'm like, yeah, it is impossible for us as educators. But then you're going to for us as students to retain. And that is the piece that we're always consistently like struggling with, and especially with like the virtual education. I mean, it can take a few minutes to get everything on, and you lose like at Monday this week we lost like an entire class. And there is no more time to make it up. It's just you don't get that time. So you're having to think on your feet, like, all right, well, what is it that I want to sprint through, and just really hope that students absorb this. And like that could be literally the only lesson that we had all year or in several years. There's no, stacking one year on top of the other. Again, it's always, reproduction, how you're, how the male and female reproductive system work, how you get pregnant, how you don't get pregnant, how you get STIs, how you don't get STIs. That's about it. And maybe a little bit about birth control if we're lucky. So all those things about like, is my relationship healthy? Am I, what's consent? Am I right? Am I being exploited? Am I being taken advantage of? What do those words even mean? It's pieces that you just in your mind make sense to it back year on year over years. And again, in terms of coming out of high school equipped and understanding your bodies and the bodies of other people around you, this model seems to make a lot of sense. But obviously, I'm not.
You also have to worry about like people being at different levels in high school, especially because I know we just added in a vocab slide because some people may not know what like oral sex is, and then they're fixated on like trying to figure out what it was the whole entire presentation, and then you're missing key information.
And that's what I was thinking about was there's so often that we're spending in our high school classes, which as you saw in those last few slides, we didn't have as much to say because that's a lot of time what we think of as sex education is learning how to prevent the things that can happen if you do have unprotected sex like STDs or pregnancy. That's such a focus, but we're not even able to focus on that if we don't know our body parts and we don't know what's risky. And we have to tell you what's where and what. We're spending so much of that extra time, and that's constantly is, an issue for sex educators is to spend that time explaining that rather than answering direct student questions, what they really want to know about, which a lot of time has more to do with their relationships and how do I navigate them and all of that stuff that we're unfortunately pressed for time. We don't necessarily get to talk about it as much. And I'm sure teachers in the classroom feel the same way. That's why they're having someone else come in to talk about it in a lot of instances because, we're experts in that field. We're all day training, reading articles, educating ourselves about this information. So we have the most accurate and up-to-date information to share with students. And so the teachers are relying on us for that sometimes. And unfortunately, it's a little bit more than we can provide in some cases. So that's why doing a curriculum like this from K through 12 is the ideal, and it doesn't always play out that way. A lot of us probably didn't get our sex education that way either. So this is the ideal, right?
Anything else? Diane, I think that you were to talk about. That's okay. That's fine.
I don't know. I don't remember. There was one, but I can't remember.
That's okay. There's a lot in there to remember, obviously, but that's easier over.
They plucked out all the stuff from that whole entire curriculum, all the way from K, all the way to 12th grade.
I think it might have been about the fact that like third graders learn about like, was it the whole sexual abuse thing, sexual assault, but like back when I was in third grade, I don't even think we ever learned about anything like that. So it's weird. So it's weird how like as years go on, it's crazy how kids are getting younger and younger learning about topics like that.
And that relates back to what you had said, like puberty is happening earlier and earlier. And now we're realizing telling them the information before prevention is going to help them navigate their lives better. So yeah, it's definitely interesting.
It's not explicitly used, but it reminded me about some other. I think back to my own, again, my education. I'm probably a little bit before yours. And I think about think about like the idea of when I started having this conversation about like sex abuse, it's more like stranger danger, that kind of, like something to be afraid of. You know what I mean? Like the one thing that as we're having this conversation now, looking at through the content, it's not like scare tactic learning or teaching. It's more like these are things that happen to people, and these are how we understand and identify them. So if they are happening to you, we're also going to equip you with the tools to figure out who it is in your circle, whether it be a parent, a guardian, somebody at school you can talk to and have this addressed, because you could get out into your teens or your adult years before you realize you've been exploited or taken advantage of, which is just horrible. Sort of in the same way I was sort of thinking, one of the things we do now and continue to get requests to do is sexually transmitted disease and infections. And for a very, very, very long time, it has been it is not really fear heavy. You know what I mean? Like I'm sure y'all have probably had some of the pictures in your books when you were learning. Like, this is what gonorrhea looks like. This is syphilis. Yeah. To me, that's a scare tactic. Like, I realize that we need to know what it is to look for if we're at risk for something and whatever, but often those images that they're using in textbooks are like extreme examples, you know what I mean? And if we understand what our risks are and understand how to protect ourselves over the course of many years, the likelihood of experiencing those things goes down substantially. So we don't need to be scaring people with that kind of information if they understand what their risks are and they understand how to prevent them before we get to those things. Well, these are a possibility if you're unsafe, for example.
All this making me think about is there's actual proof out there. They've done research on those types of education and how the students respond, and they're not understanding it the way they need to. They're most likely being scared and being, misunderstanding what they need to know about it. Mm-hmm. That reminds me also is a lot of people growing up, and some of us might have had it, is the babies. You have a baby for sex education class, and that's it. That's it. We don't talk about STDs or how to get pregnant, how to avoid it. We just have you take a baby home, and that's your lesson sometimes. Of course, there's other things that they're learning about, which is great life skills to understand, and you're understanding how difficult it is. So sure, there's some great things out of that, but it's been proven too that it is more effective to have a program like this than just a 1 week of something like that. And I'm kind of with that scare tactic thing. Scare tactics for sex education just doesn't work as well. So yeah, I can't help but think about that either, because I know that's a lot of people's experience.
Well, and if somebody doesn't have kids, I would be like, this is lost on me for another reason.
Yeah. Right.
That's not me there. Would you jump to the last slide?
Okay, there's one.
It is almost 1:30, so and I did want to finally try for folks to share any thoughts, feelings, or engage. I'm going to leave this up on the screen just so folks recognize some of the resources that are out there. The curriculum we went through specifically today is called Rights, Responsibility, and
Right respect.
Right, respect, and responsibility. See, but that is put out for the folks at the top there. Youth, National Institute of Reproductive Health. They are really great, particularly if you're curious about some of the legal efforts that are happening across the country. American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. Some of the information out of presentations from there, as well as USC or University of Southern California's Department of Nursing. And certainly some hair and word bias, but we get a lot of this information on our website, locally and nationally as well. I'm going to stop recording, and it will stay open for a few more minutes and let folks ask any thoughts or questions. And if not, again, we really are grateful for the folks that made it today. Really want to thank Cheyenne and Skylar too. Really, I cannot say enough how grateful we are for this. And I told the folks at your school that we intend to use it more, and absolutely. So thank you again for doing all this work. Appreciate it. All right, so end our recording. And